Okay, thank you for being here and welcome to the second Greg workshop on the gender perspective in STEM research. So this workshop focuses, sorry, non riesco a girare le slide, chiedo alla regia se può mettere sul titolo. This workshop, the idea of this workshop is to provide some suggestions on how to adopt a gender perspective in STEM research, and we will discuss this issue with some international speakers, colleagues, and at the end we will also update you about the structure, the next steps about the Greg community. But I now leave the floor to Arianna Montorsi, Rector's Advisor for Gender Equality and Diversity, for the institutional welcome.
Thank you, Alessandra, for inviting me here and for organizing this workshop. Greg was born a year ago as a part of the Gender Equality Plan actions, and I'm here to welcome you on behalf of the Rector and of the Vice Rector for Welfare, Equality and Equal Opportunity. I'm the Rector's Advisor for Gender Equality and Diversity, and we are here because we organized an entire week on gender, diversity and inclusion, on equality, diversity and inclusion, which is best practice at the European level, this practice of having prolongated time dedicated to formation, information on these topics. So we had a first moment, the week is named Fill in the Gaps, and we had a first moment for the students community on last Friday or Thursday maybe, very participated from international students. Then we had a moment devoted to war and peace issues. Then we have today the entire day dedicated to gender equality in occasion of the presentation of the Gender Equality Plan this afternoon. And then next week we will have another moment another day dedicated to disabilities and intersectionality and research. So this will be on the day of maybe not this week, but on this Thursday, yeah, so sorry. And so have a good time. Thank you.
Thank you, Arianna. So now, the agenda of today, as you can see here, is quite dense, let's say. So we have now a keynote speech by Beatriz Silva. I will introduce her in a while. Then we will have a talk about the opportunities and requirements for gender research, curated by Rimin and Greta Temporin. And then we will have some project presentation, so some colleagues presenting their experience in developing research or even teaching project with gender perspective. And then, as I mentioned before, we will speak about the Greg community and the next step of the Greg community. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Maria Beatriz Silva, our first speaker. Maria Beatriz is associate professor at the Mechanical Engineering Department of Instituto Superior Técnico, University of Lisbon. She's also member of the Pedagogical Council of the Engineering School, coordinator of the manufacturing area, and coordinator of the Gender Balance Group at the Engineering School of University of Lisboa. She's the coordinator of the Work Package 5 on enhancing human capital for the Unite Alliance, and we met Maria Beatriz in the context of this project. So thank you for Beatriz for accepting our invitation, and the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you very much for your kind introduction, and thank you for the invitation to be here. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, you can see it well, right?
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
good.
You.
Okay, so, I met Greta Temporin, and we have been working for the last year and a half very closely in this project. So I think you all know what Unite is. So Unite is an alliance of universities. And when this project started, so almost 3 years ago, so the project is going to finish at the end of this year, we had only 7 institutions. So we have only in the alliance 7. So we had TU Darmstadt, Aalto University, Grenoble University, KTH, Politecnico Torino, University of Lisbon, and UPC in Spain. So the 2 other, so Wrocław and University Tech, and also TU Graz, were added after this project started. So this is mainly focused the work that we have been done in these three institutions that we had in the beginning. So the Unite project, so the overall objective was to develop a shared integrated long research strategy for research for the Unite European University Alliance. And we had an emphasizing in STEM nature that structurally and sustainably impacts society, addressing, of course, the sustainable development goals and also the EU missions. And one of the specific objects that was in the proposal was to measures to remove or reduce barriers to human resources motivation, equality, career progression, and reward in Unite. So the work package was divided in 5 tasks. So the first one was to setting the framework for the Unite Human Resources Strategy for researchers. So here, this task was managed, and the leader was Politecnico Torino. So a workshop was developed and defined, and everyone shared their best practices in human resources strategy. A second task was balanced circulation of knowledge and researchers for talent promotion. Here we tried to gather information in order to understand what were the challenges that we all have, what we were doing, and also what were our struggles and how can we overcome with the shared of knowledge between what we have been doing. Task 5.3, it was equality in quality. So this was more regarding what we are here today and discussing today. So it was more regarding gender equality plans and how these actions were implemented in all the schools, and what can we do best and all of that. So most of the work that we've been doing, it was gathering information from all the institutions and what they have been doing. 5.4, it was rewarding research merit, and this was more focused on the researchers' assessment in the career. And finally, we have this Unite connection, which is task 5.5, and this is the task that we are finishing till the end of this year. And during this task, we did a series of workshops, mainly that I'm going to talk on the topics afterwards. But these workshops was to connect the community, trying to understand what are the struggles, what were the expectations, what they need, what are the needs. So we did this in the last 3 weeks. Okay, so for you to have an idea, so here you have the deliverable 5.1, which is regarding the first the first task 5.1, which is setting the framework for the joint human researcher strategy, also trying to understand what was the development support for early career researchers and sharing experiences in the human resources in all the institutions. And here you have a QR code if you want to go in deep in this deliverable you can have. I can also share these slides later so they can be sent to you. Deliverable 5.2. So we did this was to define, so we gather a lot of information I was saying before. So we gather information about the circulation of knowledge of researchers for talent promotion, equality in quality, and also rewarding research merit. So we gather a lot of information, and with all this information, we developed a joint action plan. And here you have in this deliverable also all the information regarding what were the results that we gathered from these tasks and what was the action plan that we should be doing in the future. So the joint actions that we developed and we defined at the time, it was the first one, it was Human Resources Excellence in Research Award application. So this is something that European Union, so they have this award for excellence. So it's an applying. So people, when the institution applies, they have a year to develop these and to try to understand if they are all the measures that should be done they are doing. So this from here, so Politecnico Torino, so you have already this award and it's being renewed. And for instance, University of Lisbon didn't have, so we are starting the application and we are receiving the support from Polito in order for us to guide us during the application. So this is what means this joint action 1. Joint action 2, in fact, from the first workshop from of human resources strategy, it emerged the need to support researchers' applications to Marie Curie actions. And so from these, the IRIS network evolved, and this is a separate pilot within the project. So we give support to this pilot of IRIS network. Joint action 3, it was regarding mentoring guidelines for early career researchers. And joint action 4, it was to give guidelines for gender equality plans, that I'm going also to explain a little bit what we have been doing. And joint action 5, it was researchers assessment guidelines, and joint action 6, gender in pilots. So here I'm going to talk more about these joint action 4 and joint action 6. So joint action 4, the project benefit a lot from the work from Greta Temporin, because she's a PhD candidate, and she works on the gender equality plans and the need for that, and how can we effectively build gender equality plans. And so from our work, we defined a framework to assess the gender equality plans from all the 7 institutions. And from that, we identified some best practices that I'm going to share, the best ones at the end on the next slide. And another joint action that it was emerged from it was gender in pilots, because we had several pilots in all the work packages. And one of the things that when we had the midterm assessment from European Community, so they said that we should have gender more aligned and gender perspective in all the pilots. And this was something that it was a need from the assessment that we received. And what we did some of the pilots. So when we received this, some of the pilots were already ongoing or almost finishing. So this was something that it was difficult. But from this, we identified that people were already using some ideas that, or a little bit on common sense, that what they think it should be good to use as in gender in pilot. So we gathered all this information, and we are also going to collect. And at the end of the project, so at the end of this year, we are going to have deliverable 5.3, which will have a lot of information in all these joint actions that we performed. And so now to finish, I would like to identify some of the best practices that we identified in the gender equality plans and from the communication with all our colleagues. So one is that gender equality should be an inherent part of the university strategy. This is very, very important because, as you know, gender equality plans, they started, well, some of the institutions were already doing some work, but this mainstream and all this buzz around gender equality plans started when European Commission made it mandatory for applying for H2020 in applications in horizontal Europe. So this was something that came top down, and it worked very well because all the strategies that we had previously, it was bottom up. And this one changed completely. I may say that in my school, the engineering school, we had already a group and we are already doing some things, but only when this need came from the European Commission, everything changed, because everyone was giving the time and the discussion and put gender equality on the table for discussion. So another thing that we gathered from the gender equality plans that we have from our institutions, it was that gender equality can be used as an indicator for performance-based allocation of funds. And this is very, very important. And this is something that we identified from TU Darmstadt. They have in their institution, so they have a group working on these gender equality issues for 30 years, 30. So it's a very long experience on this. And they use gender equality in the departments for funding. So they use this indicator if the department is increasing the gender equality, or if it's getting better or getting worse, in order for annually funding each department. And this is something very, very strong, because it's something that changes completely the point of view of everything. Because when we have money, when we have laws, it changes completely the perspective on the issues that we are discussing. And I just wanted to say that also TU Darmstadt, so they have these law, I would say, or rule that they are committed to fill a minimum of 1 out of 3 new professorships to women. So they have these they define when they have these researchers, so they have these top 3, and when they have one of them, it's a woman, so they put it on top, and it's the first one to be selected. So this is what I was increasing the proportion of female professors. It's very important. Another important issue is to include the gender perspective integration in research. This is something that is very, very strong, because I don't know if you know, when the seatbelts for driving cars were developed, they were developed mainly by men and engineers. And one of the problems that we had, it was that the most accidents involved children and women, because their bodies were different from the models that they had, the dummies that they have to test the seatbelts, because they were regarding the male physical body. And this is something that it's very important to integrate gender perspective. So we need to have both points of view in all the research that we do. For instance, so now EI, it's very it's in vogue, so it's very important, and it's very important in the research that we are doing. And so voice identification in the beginning, female voices were more difficult to identify because of that. And this is a way that we need to, so this is just some examples of how can we introduce gender perspective in research. Another different point of view is to do research in gender equality. And I may say that it's for me, it was mind-blowing when I met Greta Temporin, and she told me that she was doing her PhD in gender equality in Polito, and which is a technical school. And the way that you have it integrated in the departments of management and all of that. So this is something that it's a very good best practice that I think all the schools should follow, because this is a way to integrate all these issues in do research in this. Otherwise, we are not going to be able to evolve and to get a more equality world. And this is all. Thank you very much. I'm now available for questions if you have.
Any question? Okay, so thank you. I just want to give a comment. Thank you very much, Beatrice, because your speech really highlighted how today we have a growing importance of the gender perspective in the EU, and this means that universities must adapt by adapting their strategies. So we need, so there is a requirement for universities to start both strategic but also organizational change to reach gender equality, and this has some important implications also from the perspective of researchers. As researchers, we are now called to introduce, to adopt a gender perspective, or more in general, a diversity perspective in our research. And we also must be compliant to the requirements of the EU if we want to submit proposal and to get funds. And of course, not just to submit proposal to calls from the European Union, but all national government, of course, in Europe follow the same approach. So we, as researchers, we must adapt to these requirements, but this also means opportunities, new opportunities for collecting funds. And I think I now leave the floor to Greta Temporin, who will speak about this topic, opportunities and requirements for gender research. So Greta Temporin is a PhD student, so Beatrice already mentioned you. So Greta is a PhD student at the Department of Management and Production Engineering here at Polito, and her thesis is about diversity management, and she is working on gender equality plans in the European STEM universities. Greta, the floor is yours.
So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Alessandra and Beatrice, for this first speech. And first thing first, the presentation that I'm going to give today was curated by our office's Remin and Career Center. And it's also the product of a collaboration between the Gender Research Coordination Group and these offices. And how, as you can read, it will focus on how to integrate and fund research on gender, focusing on the European perspective that was actually already introduced by the speech of Beatrice regarding the Unite Alliance. So it will be divided in three parts. First, an overall perspective on how the gender dimension is becoming more and more central, especially when it comes to Horizon Europe, EU funding opportunities, and the project that it's at the center of a collaboration by Remin and the Gender Research Coordination Group, so guidelines for drafting a gender equality plan for research projects. First, when we talk about Horizon Europe, as we saw in the United Alliance that was funded, at least part of the project was funded by Horizon 2020, after Horizon 2020, with Horizon Europe, the line of the European institutions regarding gender equality was to making it more and more central. And one of the main consequences of this political decision and institutional decision was that in order to be eligible for funding received by Horizon Europe, each research and innovation institution, so universities, but also research and central in general, must have in place a gender equality plan that is approved and respects the requirements of Horizon Europe. But also, when it comes to research, it's not enough to have a strategy as an institution, as an organization to reach gender equality. Also, research should incorporate the gender dimension and the diversity dimension in order to be regarded as excellent. So we see in the evaluation criteria set in place by Horizon Europe for fund a project that the gender dimension is central to consider a project excellent from a scientific point of view. As we read, the project should give appropriate consideration of the gender dimension in research and innovation content. In general, under Horizon Europe, the integration of a gender dimension into both the organization and the research context is mandatory, unless it is explicitly mentioned in the topic description that this is not mandatory. So the mandatory nature of incorporating the gender dimension in research is not the exception, is the rule. The exception is not to take into account this dimension. Why is that so? Well, of course, because it's not only a matter of social justice and the societal relevance of gender equality, but it's also a matter of excellence and accuracy and reproducibility of the research. So taking into account this central dimension makes research excellent. And as you can see by the questions that are listed in this presentation, it applies to a large number of scientific fields, including the STEM fields, which, of course, are central for a technical university like ours. And this is also reflected by the growing importance of funding opportunities on research that not only takes into account a gender dimension, but is centered on the gender dimension, is centered on gender. And when we go to the funding and tender opportunities portal online of the European, of the EU and Horizon Europe, just applying a quick research on the keyword gender, we found that 17 call for proposals were taking the gender dimension as central, or at least fundamentals with our requirements for research projects. It's also an invitation for you to take a look at the portal and at the opportunities for funding research on gender, especially STEM research on gender, because there are increasing opportunities on this field. Then I'm going to briefly talk about the project. It's an ongoing project that it's created by our offices in Rimin and the Career Center in particular, but it's also a collaboration with our research group. It's the drafting of guidelines for integrating a proper gender equality plan, not only in the organization like ours. We have the last version of a gender equality plan of Politecnico di Torino that it's available on the website of Polito, but also in a research project, because sometimes it's mandatory to apply for grants and funds to have a gender equality plan in place for the research project. But also it's a best practice. Even when it's not required, it's a best practice that grants research excellence. So the document is made by an introduction, a template that will give the possibility to be filled by the researchers or the research group, which is composed by a step-by-step guide with suggestions, useful hyperlinks to adapt the gender equality plan to each research proposal, examples, and sources. And this is an insight on how to read this template that we're preparing. So there will be a what for a what section on the own way of including each dimension of the research project, from the composition of the research group, for example, but also the actual research content of the proposal, the methodologies, on how to integrate the gender perspective in each of these steps to have a research project. How, so the means for each key area and each area of the research proposal, how to integrate, what are the means, the actions each research group can take to integrate this dimension in the project, and examples. And as you can see here in this overview, also hyperlinks to toolkits, webinars, other types of contacts, also to provide not only guidelines, but also opportunities for formation, for education, and increasing ongoing education, I will say. This is an example of a subsection. So this will be a subsection of the gender equality plan in gender dimension in research context. There will be a description in the what section. In the how section, you see 2 actions that can be put in place to integrate the gender dimension in experiments and in the language of the paper, the final paper, for example, conference papers, and milestones, so sort of practical achievements that can be put in place to actually see if these actions are respected or not, are achieved or not. Thanks for the attention. I'm available for questions, but I'm also eager to leave the floors to the other intervention because they will be super interesting and focusing on STEM and gender. Thank you so much.
Any question? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Greta. As Greta clearly explained, we are working on this document, and of course, in the future, this kind of support will be available for everyone here at Polito submitting a proposal. So now we can move to our speakers who are going to present their experience in creating, developing a research project by adopting a gender perspective. So I now introduce Genoveva Vargas Solar. Genoveva is a principal researcher at CNRS and a member of the databases group at LIRIS. She holds 2 PhD and 2 masters in computer science and compared literature, along with certificates in feminist and gender studies. She serves as a gender equity officer at the LIRIS Lab and the Federation of Informatics of Lyon, and is part of the activist group Tierra Común and AI Alliance. So thanks, Genoveva, for accepting our invitation, and I leave the floor to Genoveva, who will talk us about how to build a diverse future, a practical guide to structuring gender inclusive STEM research projects.
Thank you very much for the invitation. It's with great pleasure that I participate in this workshop, and I'm happy to meet people that are from their sides working on important issues about gender. So I'm going to skip this because you already know what I'm going to talk about, and also you already know me. So at the beginning of the workshop, through the introduction, an important word was referred to, and it was intersectionality. I think that in order to be able to address gender from many different perspectives in many different activities, it is important to consider that gender is associated to other categories that describe the profile of people doing science and doing innovation. And so this should be the guideline with respect to which we understand the current status on projects and on science and research and innovation, and then how do we move forward into better conditions considering these aspects. So intersectionality is all about combining different dimensions, including sexuality, gender identity, religion, race, geography, because it is important to consider that it is impossible to define general strategies regarding projects and innovation, etc. It's all about the enunciation geography in which people live, and also cultural aspects are important issues to consider when we develop these kind of strategies. So, as I said, we are happy here to have this community interested in knowing how do we move and change the chip that we have been working with previous years. And so we are not the only ones, of course, in many different contexts. And also it's important to notice that a lot of fundamental references are there trying to give a framework, a theoretical framework regarding these issues, which is important because this guides also the newcomers, and this also guides the way we are going to disseminate our strategies to the general society and the society that is not acquainted with this type of movement. So, of course, there's a Royal Society since a long time ago. Elsevier in many different references have addressed the topic, and also the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. This is to complement what has been said in the previous interventions. The problem, I would say, I like to talk about problems because maybe I do science and we address problems. So the problem is that despite all these movements, we are still here talking about how to change minds, right? And so I gathered some figures regarding these kind of questions, particularly referring to a project I worked in. It's Gender STI. It's an Age 2020 Horizon project, and it concluded like 2 months ago. So we have an observatory where we gathered a lot of results, statistical results and observations done along the project, and also some guidelines that I will share with you today. So a big issue is that when projects are defined and when the practice and the professional practice of people, and particularly of women, is analyzed, we can see that we have a lot of incomers, but some leave the stage at some point. And for example, and this is because an issue that maybe is more related to women than other gender identities is that there is a problem of mental charge and of well-being aspects to be considered. And so the observations show that, for example, around 46% of female researchers experience burnout, for example, and they struggle with different responsibilities, right? So the question is that in fact, the production model of science and innovation has not changed. And this gives a limit in the type of scope and reach out that we can do in many strategies, gender-based strategies and gender-aware projects. And then lately, I mean, I think that yesterday I was having a look at a report in France about gender issues, and they say that 50% of women leave tech projects and tech professional lives before 35 years old, and this is due to three main conditions. The working conditions have not changed, and still the bro culture is there in many groups, making a negative impact in the way women feel in their work. Then performance bias. In general, what has been observed is that women are hired and promoted in the basis of their past achievements. So they are not a promise, whereas men are considered as a promise. And this perspective changes all the opportunities and also all the way in which women feel regarding the way they should provide results and be performant in their professional practices. Then the lack of prospects for career development. In many situations, the abilities are not clearly enumerated in order to know whether you can move from one step to the other. And so this blocks the feeling of being able to progress in the career. And so this harms the professional career of women, and the fact that they decide to have a long life career in tech and in general in engineering. As I was saying, the production model is a question. In many perspectives, feminist perspectives, there is this notion of breaking the glass ceiling, right? And the problem with this is that if we want to break it, this means that we want to adhere to the current production model, in which performance, in 100% availability, in which all the time, everywhere perspective is there. And so the question is whether we really want to adhere to this model in order to perform our professional careers, considering that there are social context in which we have to a role, even if it's not just and not fair, we have to deal with motherhood, with mental charge of different activities, and so 100% availability in these conditions is kind of impossible, right? So the question here is, do we want to adhere to this, or do we want to change? I think that in this, at least in this group, we are trying and struggling in order to change the model and not adhering to this. But this is important as a message to new women that want to come, young women that want to come and practice engineering and in general STEM careers. Now, another aspect to consider is the location. It's not the same, we know this from feminist studies, it's not the same being in Latin America and working in STEM rather than being in Europe, etc. So the principles are different, and this has to be considered in the best practices and in the way we open the doors to women in projects. I'm going to use this reference with respect to location. The global north is those countries, powerful countries in North America, Europe, and Australia, and then the global south, which is countries that were conquered in previous centuries, and that normally marginalized politically and culturally. Now, considering this distribution, how do we go from theory to practice and practice to theory? I gathered some examples of reference of projects that are considering gender issues and that are considered successful, right? So there's Girls Who Code, Project Include, Tech Women, She Loves Tech. And so I think that in general, these kind of projects coming from the global north try to reason about the way we can open the doors in terms of numbers and in terms of statistics and in terms of improving the community of women that want to adhere to, in general, to science, technology, and etc. Now, if we consider these kind of projects, in fact, they follow 4 steps to promote inclusiveness. The first one is consider the positionality as research and personal innovator. So there is a lot of work trying to understand these issues and that are integrated in the strategies in order to do improvements. And we have seen that, well, since these projects exist, they are considered successful. We have achieved this kind of level of inclusion. Then consider if and how gender intersectionality are relevant to the process. Intersectionality has come up as a category in many projects, and I think that this fact gave like the second step to the kind of results we are facing today. We consider the diversity of communities inside, particularly in global north countries, and this has generated progress in inclusion aspects. Now, what about non-Western partners? There is a question of the colonization perspective in when people want to include the non-Western partners into the projects, and this because in global South countries, the notion, for example, of inclusiveness changes a lot. The notion, for example, of race and gender together have different implications and impact in the way we define strategies. I have an anecdote. We defined in a database initiative that I participate in the notion of race. So you, if you wanted, you could say whether you belong to some racial group. And when we apply this to Latin American countries, we have no answers because the categories didn't correspond to what people, the perception of people about race. And the second thing is that in many Latin American countries, the being colored is not a good thing, right? So you try to perceive yourself as almost white, with a family coming from Europe. And when you have to declare yourself as Latina, for example, that is out of the question, right? So our strategy didn't function at all, and we couldn't even know whether people were being attracted to our initiative because of this. And then the fourth thing is that, of course, we want to have results now, but the thing is that the inclusiveness is a process. We have to understand the different variables and then consider this as continuous, calibrate it as we achieve the different levels if we want to organize our achievements according to levels. Now, people that have addressed some of these best practices, have also seen that mentorship is still a very important thing to do. This workshop is an example of gathering together, knowing that we are not alone, sharing our best practices, and knowing that since it is a process, through the exchange of ideas, we can also help people that want to adhere to our careers to know that there is a community there waiting for them. So in this sense, I do not mean mentorship as a patriarchal representation where you have the guru and the person will provide you knowledge and wisdom about what you should do, but rather an interactive way of exchanging ideas and seeing what to do. Then, of course, promoting female role models of different profiles. I cannot be Marie Curie, and I do not expect all women being Marie Curie, even if she was a great woman. I want to show a diverse spectrum of successful careers that people can see a model on. Then cognitive bias is also a very important thing. And well, here I'm not going to teach you this here because we have discussed this previously. Indicators, metrics, and transparency, inclusive recruitment are things to do. And I just put the last sentence. We have to promote this maybe by offering incentives, right? So you told us that from top to level, top-down strategies work. Well, let's go further and then incentivize those that adhere to this. Then in order to conclude, there is another, in my opinion, another philosophy possible, and this concerns the colonialization. In fact, even if we are in the north or in the south, the question is production model. So can't we think about new ways of producing, of interacting, and then adhering to other types of profiles and of conditions of production. So the theory of the colonialization is there. Walter Viñolo has written about this. And then how do we put it in practice? Well, today the idea is to, from the colonization perspective, is, for example, avoiding epistemologic violence. Normally, when we do state of the arts, etc., we tend to consider the top K references, those that had a lot of impact, etc. But if we do that, maybe we are ignoring other works that have been produced in other locations, in other contexts that might be valuable too. So the idea is to include in our methodologies a kind of different categories in order to not only to consider these top K most referenced resources, but different kinds of them. So this is a way of doing this. Then accountability in scientific practice. We have to share the results of our research, but also who produced them, in which conditions, whether the groups were diverse or not, inclusive or not, and all this is the best practice that we should share in our scientific results. And then, of course, when we define a project, we have to consider who is the audience that we are addressing to, and is this audience diverse, and are we being inclusive in the way we design our projects, and who is going to benefit from our results. This kind of exercise can be also very important. And then, of course, inclusive language and the way we transmit the results is also an important thing to consider in our way. So just to conclude, an example from the CNRS is that since like 5 years ago, they adhered to the San Francisco Declaration Research Assessment, and now our evaluations look like this. If you consider that you, in a 5 years or 2 years period, you taught a lot and defined projects a lot, but maybe your publication production was not very important, you ponder your different activities and your evaluation is done with respect to the pondering that you have proposed and declared to the evaluators. So in a way, you give the control of the evaluation process to the person who is being evaluated according to her perspective of the way she performed during a certain period, but not only to. So in a way, you give the control of the evaluation.
So as I was mentioning, Genoveva, we thank her because she is now in Mexico, and she accepted our invitation, even if it's very early now in Mexico. And she's Genoveva also collaborates with the Polito in some projects with Tania Cerquitelli, but she also has a course here at Polito module within soft skills course at the PhD of our PhD school. I think we can move to the next presentation and hopefully if okay.
I'm here.
Okay, wonderful. I was
yeah, I was expelled. I think that I was saying too many dangerous ideas, and so tough. Yes, I just wanted to conclude with respect to aspects that, and particularly projects that have considered the colonization and feminist-based innovation. I will not zoom in because we are running out of time, but the invitation is to have a look at these projects and the way they change the perspective in which they have organized projects and that they address interesting scientific aspects with this perspective. And the only thing that I want to conclude with is that, of course, we want to innovate and we want to break barriers, unlock potential diverse perspectives, and then imagine a more inclusive and progressive future. And I'm happy to see this community working with this perspective too. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Genoveva. Thank you for your very interesting talk. I think it was very useful to highlight how building a gender-inclusive STEM research projects requires intentionality, clear steps, a well-structured process. It's not just an annoying part to comply to some requirements to get funds. It's something we must design since the beginning of a research project. So thank you very much. And now I will move to the next speech. We have the speech by Valentina Agostini, who is Associate Professor at the Department of Electronics and Telecommunication of Politecnico di Torino and member of Interdepartmental Center Polito Biomed Lab, Biomedical Engineering Lab, together with Chiara Bertone, who is Associate Professor in Sociology of Cultural and Communication Processes at the University of Eastern Piedmont, where where she teaches sociology of the family and gender studies, and their project is conducted together with Esther Michalizzi, who is a contract professor in special educational needs and social policy, families and elderly at the Department of Cultures, Politics and Society of the University of Turin. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Alessandra, for the invitation and for the kind introduction. And so, together with Professor Bertone and Dr. Esther Michalizzi, today we will introduce some of the ideas that we share together in our journey. And by the way, I would like to start from my own research as a biomedical engineer, and let's say some questions related to gender that I encountered really, that I asked their help as a sociologist to understand some key points, something that I really consider key points in my research. So my research is about clinical gait analysis, which is the fact that we place some sensors on the patient's body to track, to monitor human motion during locomotion. This is helpful for persons with, let's say, some orthopedic or neurological problems like Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, orthopedic problems, something like that. Let's say that in the framework of a gender-based medicine approach, the aim of this contribution is to increase the awareness about the importance of a gender perspective in clinical gait analysis. And I will start with a couple of examples to introduce the question. Let us consider a lot of, let's say that in many clinical trials, the protocol is considered appropriate, it is considered sound research. We have a gender matching between the number of males and females enrolled in the study. So, for example, if we enroll 20 females and 20 males, the reviewers will be okay, and you can proceed basically with your acquisition. Of course, there are situations for some specific pathology like Parkinson's disease that I studied, which the number of males is greater since there are more males than females having Parkinson's disease basically. So if you need to study also a control group, so a reference control group of healthy individuals, you basically need to have an appropriate, the same percentage, let's say, more or less the same number of males as in the experimental group and the same number of females as in the experimental group. This is the situation, the appropriate situation to have a gender matching. This is what it is, let's say, scientifically recognized. Then the real, what can happen in reality, because it happened to me, is then you may have to discuss then with clinicians, because what they typically do to obtain a control group is having the caregivers, so wives, husbands, and partners of the patients, to be enrolled in the study as a reference subjects, as a control group. But then, if, of course, there is this mismatch in the experimental group, then you will have this mismatch in the control subject, because, of course, the wives will be higher percentage with respect to the husband, so you will have a kind of double mismatch in your control group. This can be and then probably, yeah, what it was my experience that the clinician was not indeed interested in discussing this issue. It was just meaningful for him. We just didn't want to discuss it, and okay, it's okay, no problem. They are the caregivers, so that's good enough. For me, it was not good enough at all from a scientific point of view, indeed. And so let's say that when you're lucky and you obtain a gender match population, which is not always easy, The problem can come even afterward. So after the gender matched, hopefully gender matched data acquisition, you can have a problem with processing. What do you mean by that? That typically in clinical gait analysis, and I really cannot understand why, everything is just mixed up after. So after you have obtained this wonderful gender matching, you just mix up, you just pull every data, and the only difference you are interested in is distinguish between patients and controls and looking at the differences between patients and control, just forgetting about the gender dimension. That's all. This is what happens in research in clinical gait analysis, where there are evident biological differences that we have, and also the others, of course, but there are evident biological differences that we should take into account. The second example relies to another studies related to chronic low back pain. So we performed this study. We were provided a data set of 42 patients, and again, let's say no information was provided about the gender of patients, so we had to study what happened to the patient before and after certain rehabilitation treatment. And so we did the job, we did our job of biomedical engineers, but then so clinicians found that it was just irrelevant to study, again, the dimensional gender. So afterwards, I decided that I wanted to look at it, and to do that, I had to look at the first name of, the given name of the subject, because I had no other possibility to retrieve the information. And by the way, it may be difficult for the GDPR regulations to obtain it and for privacy reasons nowadays. But with this data set, I was able to retrieve back the fact that 29 of the patients were females. So that was just a striking information for me, just a very important information. So everything should have been restudied again from the very beginning, because this very important information was missing. So a lot of, the huge majority of the patients were women with low back pain. But again, the information just disappeared. Now I leave the floor to Professor Bertone.
Yeah, so we discussed how to address the questions posed by Professor Agostini's research. And the issue is invisibilization. How can it be possible with all this framework that gender can be ignored, and so how the sustained legitimation of much of the scientific community can support this invisibilization of gender issues? So these kind of issues are often addressed by gender-based medicine through the notion of gender bias. So I don't think I need to explain much about it here. Gender bias in medicine refers to the unequal treatment of people based on their gender in the health and medical system. It can manifest itself in many ways, as you see. And there are two ways in which healthcare and research can be gender biased. The first one is that medicine tends to be gender blind, in the sense that gender is not taken into account whenever it is relevant, as we have seen. But also the other meaning is that medicine is male biased, since most of the knowledge about health and illness is about men and their health implicitly. But the feminist challenge that we can take up to develop a gender perspective in research goes much farther and addresses some of the limits of how gender bias is discussed. The first one is that gender is often perceived as an individual characteristic, a variable, rather than a lens, a comprehensive lens for critical research. And the second is that many studies so only focus on comparing, contrasting, and describing gender bias as a mindset problem, a cognitive bias, a psychological mechanism that can be addressed through greater representation of women in clinical research, STEM fields, and gender mainstreaming policies. If we look at feminist theorists on science and technology, we can take the challenge a bit farther. We can start from conceptualizing gender as a social relation constituted through historical and material processes, and so provide a critical understanding of gender dynamics and gender inequalities in the production of scientific knowledge as a structural phenomenon, a building block in how science is done. So gender bias in this way can be read as the product of social, historical, deep processes, so leading to a construction of science based on expropriating female knowledge, legitimizing certain definition of natural differences inscribed in bodies and minds. So we can change, somehow we can reformulate the question saying which power dynamics in the material organization of knowledge production have led to women's knowledge being dispossessed and to the consolidation of gender biases. And feminist epistemology is a really fascinating field, goes even farther to challenge claims for abstract and universal objectivity that aims to conceal cultural beliefs and practices of how research is done. And what they claim is to incorporate reflexivity as a method of inquiry and looking at the production of knowledge as situated knowledges. So requiring a situated and emancipatory stance that takes into account the material structures and embodied practices shaping knowledge building processes. And this is very much theory. And one more thing is that the epistemic contribution of feminist studies in science on situating knowledges goes beyond gender and opens up to consider challenges from other minority knowledges, as Colette Guillaume calls them, standpoints from minority experiences, and to explore the relations of technoscientific knowledge with other axes of social differentiation, class, race, sexuality, ability. So, what about our research practices? So, how to go on with this? Vediamo un po'. Okay. What all this says that what is needed is a multidisciplinary, collective, reflective endeavor that should permeate knowledge production at all levels. And here we want to point to the integration of research and teaching conceived as a reflective dialogue with new generations, a dialogue that is nurtured by, and we know, nurtures research. And Bell Hooks says so much about how teaching is important for our knowledge production. It is in this light that we see our experience with the Polito initiative on developing the multidisciplinary Big Challenges courses, where we worked on integrating biomedical and social science perspectives on neuroengineering, together with our tutor, also Esther Michalizzi, and Marco Ghislieri. So it was the occasion to develop our collaboration beyond, with me and Professor Agostini, beyond our history of discussing feminist epistemologies. And here I want just to go to give some hints about what this teaching did to our ideas about research. One is the perspective we proposed, that is of historicizing scientific research practices and knowledge. So we started, for example, from Nicholas Rosen and Abir Rashed's History of Neurosciences. And to outline how the modern formation of gender is embedded in the very constitution of modern science and medicine, we started with the history of witch hunt, the violent exclusion and expropriation of women's knowledges on bodies and their healing, and on reproductive and caring practices that is foundational of modern Western medicine. A history that sees, in turn, modern medicine as foundational to the development of a binary notion of gender. As Federici tells us, this is not a history of stereotypes, cognitive bias, cultural trends. These changes are entrenched in the transition from feudalism to capitalism, with the construction of the body as a labor force and the separation of productive and unproductive labor. So we need to think structural. From the student's perspective, the students were very keen on this attention to a materialist analysis of technology's development. They asked us about taking account of how market dynamics, global market dynamics, the dynamics between global north and global south influence the directions of this, but they also, and this is related, push towards an intersectional analysis. Gender is not the only dimension of inequality to be considered. It has to be considered in relation to something else. Out of the sensitivity of the many international students that were attending the course, we have addressed the coloniality of technologies, recognizing the lasting legacy of the epistemic injustices we talked about before, marginalizing forms of knowledge by colonized and racialized populations. But students, in their essays, then tended to reflect on the social implications of technological development more in terms of consequences, unequal access to technologies, where the gender inequalities are easier to see. It's more difficult to see them at the level of the practices of data production. And so we worked, for example, on an article with accounts of patients involved in clinical trials related to brain-computer interface, to discuss with the students that it is not only a question of avoiding gender bias in the samples, developing gender-sensitive data analysis, but of reflecting on how gender is more deeply embedded in how the suitable patient, the more rational patient, for example, and the suitable relation between humans and technologies are constructed. So all these reflections then go back to research design. And we are just at the beginning of our reflections on a research project that we have called Constructing the Template Walker in Clinical Gait Analysis, so the abstract, objective, neutral walker, that is the product actually of processes of invisibilization in knowledge production. And this would require historicizing, as we said, and investigating research practices on gender, but also on how it intersects with other dimensions of social differentiation. The issue is how these ways of constructing our research questions are compatible, how can be made compatible, or how they are in tension with the logics of investment and research applications today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your nice speech. I think you, as a group, as a team, are a good example of how it's important to develop a multidisciplinary research project when dealing with the gender perspective in particular. Of course, in order to develop a STEM project with a gender perspective requires competencies that maybe in STEM or we don't, in STEM domains we don't have. So it's important also to collaborate with researcher people from the humanities. And this can really conduct to the excellence of a research project. So, any question? This is time for Q&A, both to Genoveva, but also Valentina and Chiara. Any question from the floor? So we have a question from Anna. We have the microphone here. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the very interesting presentations. I think I have a question that is relating to the presentations that were proposing a practical way to go and proceed towards more gender in STEM especially, which I suppose you have addressed in your research. And I'm curious to know whether, I see a number of hindrances for women to act on an equal basis as men, which come from many different sources, some of which are cultural, some of which are practical. And my feeling is that we could address some of these hindrances more quickly by proposing practical support measures. One example that comes to my mind is, for instance, when you think about the abilitazione scientifica nazionale, we have some inflation for publications in case you were a mother, for instance. So there are practical ways to address the practical hindrances that, for instance, maternity gives you whenever we talk about comparing the productivity of men and women, scientific productivity. Other hindrances, which are not practical, which are cultural, take much longer to be addressed, and these require a cultural action, which is a totally different kind of action, which, of course, can benefit from practical support measures. So my question is, do you envisage the importance of these different timings, basically, which come from the fact that some problems, some hindrances that we are facing can be more or less quickly addressed. Some of them take necessarily a very long time. So how do you go about this, I would say, rather fundamental difficulty? Because, I can say from my perspective and my experience, that I don't see that we are so far away from being on an equal basis in terms of the way we are perceived as researchers. We are very far away from being equally perceived or equally able to devote time to research whenever, for instance, we have responsibilities as mothers or caregivers and so on. So just wanted to share this reflection. Thanks.
I don't know if maybe also Beatrice and Genoveva want to answer this question. So go Genoveva.
Thank you for the comments and question. I think that of course there are immediate ways, aspects that can be addressed. I am going to give one that is very controversial in France. There is a question about your productive time, right, in in the day. And what has been given as strategy is that, for example, mails or interaction on Slack and these kind of things should respect working time. Right. So the idea is that if you want to send an email to a colleague and you are sending it out of the working hours, then you should program your email for the morning of the next day. So, of course, this is controversial because what happens if you are working with other people internationally, etc. But this kind of strategies are there, are being implemented. If you feel attacked or uncomfort about receiving workload out of your working hours, you can complain. And in this sense, you address not only women with maternity duties, but caregiving people in general, or even child-free women that want to have I don't know, to do sport or do other activities during the day. So as I said, even if it's controversial, this kind of actions are there, are immediate, and can change the way people see productive time. And what I think is that even if we are considering gender, considering other categories can ease the way in which your strategies are perceived by people, and also it can be more immediately adopted by organizations or by institutions.
So, like, no, I'm not going to add much to the brilliant intervention of Henogeva. I will say that probably it's a matter of balance between practical immediate intervention and long-term cultural intervention on many, many levels. I don't see a topic that is like concerned by gender equality or is relevant to gender equality that can be addressed only by practical intervention or long-term cultural, very difficult to implement intervention. And when it comes to maybe the example that you brought up, like motherhood, parenthood, I think it's the same. And it's something that I would like to consult of the gender equality plan of Polito, because there was an attempt to intervene on the matter from both point of view, like with very practical intervention that are aimed to grant services to be immediate, also like in terms of benefits. But when it comes to, for example, parenthood, this practical intervention needs to be accompanied, to go along with a very cultural long-term change. For example, in the perception that parenthood is like something that only matters for women, while is actually should be perceived as a generalized problem, not only a women matter, because if we only perceive it as a women matter, then the risk is to create even more discrimination, like to associate the fact that parenthood, motherhood in this case, is like women's business and is not like their partners or like men and other types of person business. So I don't have an easy answer to your question that I think is very relevant, but that's my perspective on this.
Yeah, maybe what I would like to add that they are not so separated, practical intervention now and cultural change in the long time, because in order to do some practical change now, you need awareness of, for instance, the Politecnico reality or the scientific community on the fact that these changes are for the good of the entire community. And such awareness comes from a cultural change. So it's a very intricate issue. And as Greta mentioned, we tried in our gender equality plan a number of practical measures, and not all of them went to the end, because in the end many obstacles appears, and these obstacles are due to the fact that such cultural awareness is not yet here. So yes, you are right.
I don't know.
Okay.
Thank you,
I don't know if I
Arianna.
can
Also,
add.
yeah, Beatrice,
Yes,
if you want to
thank you.
answer.
So I just wanted to give you an example. So for you to have an idea. So in some of our gender equality plans from the Unite Alliance, we have this measure for female professors. After they have the maternity leave, they have the ability to stay 1 semester without classes, just doing research. And this is something that it's something that they can use it. I may say that in our school, we have these measures since 2016. And do you have an idea how many women benefit from it? 0. Because they don't feel the confident enough to ask to use this measure. Because this is something, as Professor Montorini was saying. So she was just saying that we need to improve the awareness that we have on this field, because even women feel guilty when they just are just for applying for something that they deserve it. So I just wanted to share this. Thank you.
Thank you, Beatrice. Arianna, do you want to add something else?
Yes, as an example of this feeling guilty, it's not just a matter of taking 6 months or even a year of teaching leave when you come back from the maternity. It's a matter of changing the way at which you evaluate researchers, because yes, maybe you had 6 months, but then you are evaluated according to the number of publications, the number of citations, which is not a measure of, it's not a measure of your research. And so but we don't go to that point. We limit our requirements to, well, add 6 months of teaching leave for maternity, so that then our productivity is good compared to the productivity of males. But it is the criteria which is wrong, and the criteria is wrong because it's originated from a cultural community which is not diverse, not enough diverse. It's dominated by a certain approach. So, and also for genitoriality, maternity, paternity leave. Okay, we will see this afternoon in the gender equality plan. We realize that even if men and women are in equal numbers, and paternity leave is mandatory also for men, men ask 1/10 of paternity leave than women in our institution. So this means that they don't want to take it for some reason, for cultural reason. I don't know why, but they don't feel that they want that right. Okay.
Yeah, if I may add, connected to what Arianna was saying, today we are evaluated using the same indicators, men and women. Of course, short-term, mid-term measure could be to include many indicators in the evaluation process and leave the possibility to people to choose in which one of these dimension indicators you want to be evaluated, no? Because we know that also women are usually, even in their job, they do what is called invisible work, that usually is work, but is not in the criteria we use to evaluate for career progression. So if you want practical example, this could be one, no? That if we can choose the indicator we want are used to evaluate our CV when we apply for career progression, this can be an effective way. Okay, any other question?
I actually have so many questions for all the speakers, but I think maybe I'm going to ask the questions later or like by email. I just wanted to share like a consideration that came into my mind like after all the presentations. And I think this workshop was a good way to challenge the very eradicated idea that science is neutral and must remain neutral, and rather gave us the perspective, the fact that science sometimes, many times, is blind and must, instead of being incorporating neutrality, incorporate equality. And that's the only consideration I wanted to share. Thank you.
So thank you, Greta, and thank you to all the speakers for the nice discussion. I just want to conclude with telling something more about the future of GREG. Can I have the presentation, please? So GREG now is, I remind you that GREG is the group, the coordination group of gender research at Politecnico of Torino. Some months ago, the rector nominated some of us as member of the coordinating group, so myself, Claudia De Giorgi, Arianna Montorsi, Tania Cerquitelli and Stefano Sacchi, Luca Falsea and Greta Temporin. But our role is to bridge the community of people doing research here at Polito with the governance of Polito. And in our mission, we also have let's say the task of supporting is the process for the creation of a GREG community. In particular, we want to build this community and in particular an active community of people collaborating and being part of GREG. We don't want to have just people as a target of the events we organize. We want to involve you as active part of our activities. So today we want to launch this call for interest in joining 3 working groups. We want to create, they don't exist at the moment. So we want to build these 3 working groups, one focused on the 3 missions of the university. So one working group focused on teaching, learning. We as GREG have been already involved in some teaching activities. In particular, we have designed 2 courses, soft skills courses for Scudo. We also have a couple or even more courses in Grandi Sfide Globali program, but we have participate to the teaching week last year. So we are doing some teaching and learning activities, but of course we would like to involve more people. So we and also think of many other initiatives in this respect. So the first call of interest is for this working group. Another working group is about research. As Greta explained, we are collaborating with the RIMING in order to build these guidelines in order to create a gender equality plan for projects. And in this respect, we would like to build a multidisciplinary team, because of course supporting people in all the domain within Polito about how to introduce the gender dimension requires very different competencies. So it would be great to have people from different scientific domains. In the future, we also would like to develop even work packages to propose to people. So we can be also actively involved in other projects if we are asked to support the project in designing since the beginning the project by taking into account the gender dimension. And the third working group is about knowledge transfer, and in particular organization of seminar events. So these are the three teaching working groups. We will contact you asking your availability to take part in this. And of course, I just gave some ideas about what can be the work of this working group, but every idea from you, of course, will be more than welcome. Last, we are on LinkedIn, so please follow Greg. We will, as you can see now, we have two followers, Greta and me, but because it was a surprise for today, so we have created this week this group, and we will send you an invitation to follow Greg on LinkedIn. And we also have some contacts. So Greg Polito is the email to contact all the coordination group, while we also created the Greg community mail, which is a, can we translate the list, distribution list, the mailing list, distribution list. So you can, if you write to this Greg community email, everyone in the community will receive your message. So we will ask you if you want to be added to this Greg community list, and then we will start to use it for the community. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this workshop. Thank you very much for attending it. Of course, if you have any other question, we are here, but as we are a bit, no, we are perfectly on time, so if you want to add anything, we are here.